So this is our last meeting, which is crazy, but we're going to be talking about course management, and by that I mean just setting up our grade book, making grade items and grade categories if you want to, and then grading student submissions, and also looking at class progress within the course context. So I'm going to hop over to a course, and it's going to be a different one than I've been using just because it actually has some content that I could play around with. And first things first, we're going to look at the gradebook. So that is up here in your green bar, and it is the grades area. So if you click on grades, it opens up one of two things. If you've already set up your gradebook or you've already set up some grade items, then you'll probably see this enter grades screen. So on this screen, you can see that up here the enter grades is blue highlighted, so that means that's the page I'm on. There are 3 others you could be on. On this manage grades, or sorry, enter grades page, you get a list of all of your students, and I only have one, so there's not a lot to look at here. But I do want to point out this little drop down here. So if you have more than 20 students in your course, I recommend giving this a click and upping it to 50 so you could see everyone on one page. Otherwise, you'll just have to go between pages, which might not be that big a deal, but if you want to see everyone all at once, I recommend 50 per page. You can see that we have multiple columns here, and your gradebook might look a little bit less or a little bit more depending on how much work you've done with it already, but each column here represents a grade item. So I have a grade category here, actually, so it's spanning all 4/5 of these columns, and each of these is a different grade item. And you can kind of tell which ones are associated with assignments just by the different little icons here. But there's a better way to see what's associated with which thing when we go to manage grades. But just before I move over there, in the enter grades area, we have our columns for all of our grades, so you could get an at-a-glance view of student grades. And then at the end here, we have our many things that I have in here. We have our final calculated grade at the end and the final adjusted as well. I believe I also have it in the front of my grade book just in case I don't want to scroll all the way over. But from here, you can grade stuff manually if you would like. These little context menus come in handy when that is the case. You would just click on it. You can edit some properties. You can just edit the grade item, enter some grades, view statistics, things like that. And the only other thing that I want to point out about enter grades before we do anything else is the switch to spreadsheet view. So if you just have a bunch of grades you just want to enter, like maybe you do participation and attendance as separate grade items, you can click switch to spreadsheet view, and it'll give you a bunch of text boxes for all of your items here. So now I have editable items or text boxes for each of these grade items, and I can just kind of type away with some points if I like. So it's a quick and easy way to just enter some manual grades if you don't like to do everything in Brightspace, or if you're just doing most of your stuff traditionally in person and you want to enter them into Brightspace later. So that is something we could talk about separately if you want to, if you have questions about it, but that's pretty much the basic breakdown of the enter grades area. So I usually like to keep it in standard view just because I don't want to accidentally change anything. So I recommend that as well. But what I'm going to start out with is this setup wizard, because it's more likely, if you haven't touched the gradebook at all, that this is where you'll start out. So the setup wizard is this nifty little tool in Brightspace where you can kind of follow the 7-step process and set up your gradebook. So because I've already set mine up, mine is kind of a summary of what my gradebook is set up like. So I have a points grading system. I have it set to release the calculated final grade and automatically do so. I have it to drop ungraded items, keep final grades updated automatically, things like that. So as you go down, they have some like view displays for students and for you, and that's pretty much all you could do in the setup wizard. But I'll show you it step by step just so we could see what it looks like when you do it the first time. If you click on the start button, it just kind of brings up the setup wizard and it says step 1 of 7. So you'll get to pick your grading system here, whether that's weighted, points, or formula. Either way is completely fine. Weighted and points are the most popular. I personally prefer points, but I don't actually teach a course. So honestly, it's up to you Weighted works really well with categories, and I guess points does as well, but I feel like people who use the weighted grading system use categories more than the points people. So whatever you decide, you just click the little radio button to change your grading system, and as you go down, you just click continue. So we click continue and we get to step 2. And step 2 is how you want your final grade released. So it's kind of specific. We have 2 types of release here. We have the calculated final grade, which is just like the mathing of the entire grades you put in the gradebook. So all of those combined, that's your calculated final grade. Or you can do the adjusted final grade, which is where you can kind of bump things up if you need to, or adjust if you need. That's why it's called adjusted. So you can modify or adjust users' grades before releasing them, whereas calculated is just the plain math. That's it, no, fooling around with that. Whatever you choose is completely up to you, but just take note of this little checkbox down here. It may be blank for you, and that may be what you want, but if you do check this, it automatically releases the final grade. And when this is enabled, the system automatically marks the user's final grades as released once they are created. So as soon as that last grade is in, it's just sending that final grade to the student and they get it. So that might be what you want. If you have like a fully calculated grade system, there's not going to be any like ups or downs with it. But if you do plan on adjusting it, I would say to uncheck this. And you can always release the final grade when you need to. And if you need help with that, you can always reach out to me at the end of the semester. But if you're not sure you really want to release them automatically, you can just uncheck it for now. You can change these at any time after the setup wizard is over. This little settings button in the top right of grades kind of brings you to an area where you can change all of these things at any time during the course. So I will show that a little bit. But after this step 2, you just click continue to go to step 3, which is grade calculations. So in this, it just means like for your ungraded items, if you like to do your grade items out ahead of where you are in the course, you can have the ungraded items just be dropped, so they're not part of the final calculation, or you could have them treated as a 0, so they do count, but they are zeros until otherwise stated or changed. So you can choose that here, and again, you can change that in the settings afterwards if you want to change it. We also have this automatically keep final grade updated. So that's kind of, as you're going through the course, if you're doing a calculated grade specifically, or I guess both work, you can have that updated as you go through the course. So as you get a new quiz in and people are getting new grades, that adds to their final grade calculation. They could see that as they go through the course. So that's a good one to keep checked if you like it. And then if we go to step 4, it's really basic because we have one option. The only organization scheme we have is percentage, though I know there is a way you can create your own schemes. So if you have letter grades that you prefer to use, you can click on the schemes button up here in the grades tool and kind of fill out your grade or letter scheme if you like. If anyone has any questions about that, you can meet with me separately to talk about it, because I've done it for one faculty member and it seemed to work okay. So it definitely is possible, but only for our needs today, percentage is the only option internally. So unless you choose something else, make something else, percentage is the only one. So that's an easy continue. Step 5 is also pretty simple. It's just the display option for you. So the manager of the grades, how many decimal points displays for each grade. So the default is 2. That's usually a good place to stick it, but if you prefer to have 1 or 0 to kind of like round up, especially for quizzes and things like that, you can change that here. And again, you can change it at any time in the settings. So that's an easy one to continue through. And then step 6 is our student view display. So what the students see on their side. And they will not see what you see in enter grades. Theirs is a bit more simplified. So they'll just see like assignment 1 and their grade on the right, assignment 2, then their grade. So theirs is really basic. And you can choose some details here, like their points grade, if you want the points grade to show, the grade scheme symbol, which I have yet to figure out, but I usually keep it checked anyway, just in case. It's probably the percentage because it's the grade scheme that we're using. It probably puts a % there. Grade scheme color, that's kind of like if they're in, the passing grade, it's green. If they're kind of close to failing, it's yellow. If it's failing, it's red. So if you don't like that grade scheme color on their side, you can get rid of it. And then there's also their decimals displayed. So if you want it different than what you see, you can change that from 2 to whatever you like for the decimal points. And then characters displayed is just for like text feedback in the gradebook. So if you want to put like very long feedback text in the gradebook area, you can change this from 50 to whatever you like. I don't think there is a character limit, but it does say between 0 and 50, so I guess that's the limit. But it'll be truncated if it's longer than that. But there is feedback available in like the assignments, quizzes, and discussions, and you could do as much as you like. But within the gradebook itself, it's very short. And then we can have our final grade calculation, so display final grade calculation to users. So how it was calculated up is pretty much what that means. And then once we're done with the student view there, it just gives us a summary in step 7. So this is the same thing I showed at the beginning. It shows us what our grading system is, the final grade options, and things like that. And if everything looks good, then you can kind of just finish up here, and it'll give you a little grade options page, which gives you some ideas of where to go next with your gradebook. And like I said before, if you want to change any of those settings, you don't have to go through all 7 steps of the setup wizard again, because that could take a bit. You could always come over here to settings on the right. And when you click on that, you can get 3 different options here to play with. You have your personal display options, so what you want to see in the gradebook. So if you want to see their username for some reason, you can. You can see the scheme color and the symbol and the points grade. And then how many number of columns before the user details repeat, like things like that. Very customizable and very cosmetic things you can choose here. And you can also you can also choose which start page you like. So if you like the enter grades area where you see all the students and all of the columns of your activities, you can keep it on enter grades. But if you prefer to come to the manage grades area first, then you can definitely do that. You just have to select from the drop down where you would like to start when you click on grades. I prefer the enter grades area though, personally. And then up top we have org unit display options and calculation options. So again, org unit display has those decimal points for you and then decimal points for students, and the same student options that we saw before in the setup wizard. And then calculation options are like the weighted points, things like that, and the final grade and grade calculations. So kind of just like condenses them into 3 areas instead of 7 different steps. So if you're looking to change any of those at any time, you just click on settings in the top right of grades. So actually, it brought me back to the manage grades page, which is great because that's where I wanted to go next. So we started off on enter grades, we did the setup wizard, and now we're on manage grades. And this area is great for creating grade items, creating grade categories, and kind of figuring out everything about your gradebook. So this is a good place to go specifically to see if you have any associations with your grade items. Now, if you remember from the last video from last week, you can either create grade items beforehand and just have them unassociated with anything. They just sit on their own, kind of like a participation grade item. It doesn't have an activity associated with it. It's just participation. Or you can have a grade item created ahead of time and then connect it to an activity later. So something like final project that I have here, it doesn't have an association. So I could create one for it because otherwise I don't really know what it's associated with, even for myself. And then another way to do it is when you're creating the assignment or discussion, you can create the grade item at the same time, which is what I did for many of these. So as I created free write number 2 in the assignments tool, there was the option to create a grade item, which I did, which then associated it with the gradebook, and that's why it says assignments here. So this is also important because if you want to delete any of these grade items for any reason, you can only delete ones that do not have an association. So I can only delete final project from this area because it doesn't have an association. Now, if I wanted to delete like an assignment, like any of these free write activities, I'd have to go to the assignments tool to actually delete it. Or I could just unassociate it, remove it from grades or whatever. I can show you what I mean by that a little bit later, but I just wanted to let you know in case you're trying to delete some of these grade items, if you have extra ones, you're not sure why. If it has a dash here in this 3rd column, then you're good to delete it. If it has an association, you will need to go to that specific tool to like unassociate the discussion or the assignment from the grade item. So just a little bit of housekeeping. And if you forget that, just send in a help desk ticket and I'll help you out with it because it's kind of confusing.
Riley, can we describe the assignment the way we want, or did you choose from a category for these? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'll say assignment and free write, but did you pull these out of a category or just, I mean, did you go to a page to choose?
Oh, I see what you mean.
A type of assignment, or do you just?
Well, if you remember from last week, when we create assignments, they can just live in the assignments tool, or we could connect them to the gradebook. So in many of these cases, I think I created the grade item the same time I created the assignment. So like there was that score out of ungraded, and I changed that to a grade, and then picked created my grade item from the assignment page. So that's one way to do it. So you do it all at the same time. But then there's an instance here where I created final project and I just didn't make an assignment for it yet. So it's just kind of here. In which case you could always go back to the activity, like in this case, an assignment, and edit the assignment to add the grade item. And I will show you how that works.
Okay.
Because we're going to create a grade item very soon, and then I'll show you what I mean.
That makes sense.
Okay, good. I always worry with grade items. They're a bit confusing. But I do have some categories in here in the manage grades area. Well, I have one category. And these are particularly useful if you want to, use a weighted scheme, or even for points, you could do it. You could have it where, let's see, I'll edit this category actually to show you what I'm talking about. In the category, when you create one, you get to create or fill out all of these different fields, and you have your name. The short name is just what appears in the enter grades area. So if you have like a very long category name or a very long assignment name, you can always condense them. But with the categories, you can make entire categories like excluded from the final grade calculation if you just have some like little activities that don't amount to anything grade-wise, but they're still good for course content. You can exclude them from the final grade calculation, so they do still get like a little score, but doesn't count towards the final grade. You can also distribute points across all the items in your categories. So if you are using categories and you want all of your, in this case, free writes to count for 10 points, you can say, okay, I want to distribute points across all my items, and I want it to be 10 points per item. And I'm not going to really mess with these two items here, but I do want everyone to be 10 points. And I think all of mine were all over the place before, so this is a good way to kind of standardize. You could also, display class average to users and things like that. Usually we don't do that, but this is kind of the breakdown of a category. You just kind of set up the name and the short name and the points for it if you want to distribute across all of the items in your category. But there's also restrictions. If you click over on restrictions, you can hide the category from users. You can have a specific availability date for it. So if you don't want your students to see, say, their quiz grades until maybe the third week of school or something like that, you can have your availability for this category to be a certain window of time, so that's when they can see their grades. I don't know of another use case for that, but it's definitely useful. Maybe even if it was for like the final project sort of array of activities, you can have the start date be like the last week of school. That's when they'll get their grades for it. That kind of idea. But you don't really have to play with the restrictions in here. They're just options. And if I click save and close, I think I'll see my distribution points kind of figured out here. So these 4 free write activities, I think one of them was worth 50 points, another one was worth 5. Now, because I edited my category, they're all worth 10. So that's a benefit of categories. You can kind of standardize what's within it and go from there. Now I'm going to create a grade item and show you how to backtrack it to like an activity or something like that. Specifically for assignments, I think they're useful because the assignment page is a little bit confusing when it comes to grade items. Discussions and quizzes are a little more straightforward with the pick a grade item or create a new one, but the assignment page is a little bit weird. So we're going to create a new item. So you just click that blue button and then click item. and it lets you choose what type of grade item we're going for. So personally, I'm going for numeric, but you can even do like pass fail or like a formula, calculated, a text, so that you could provide comments. But whatever one you do choose, you can always provide feedback for your grade items no matter which one you choose. So I'm going to click numeric, and on this properties tab, we just give it a name. So I'm pretty sure the assignment I'm thinking of is literary analysis 2. Pretty sure that's the one that doesn't have one. So short name, I'm just going to say like LA2. You don't need one, but it's useful sometimes. And then for categories, I'm not going to put one in. I just have a category for free writes, but for literary analysis, I do not. So I'm just going to leave it alone for now. Under here for grading, I'm going to give it a maximum points of 50. You can make that whatever you like. And you could choose whether it exceeds those points, if it can exceed those points, whether it's a bonus item, and that'll give it like a gold star in your managed grades area, so you can kind of identify which items are bonuses. And then it doesn't really count towards the overall setup of your grade book. So if you're doing weighted and everything's already at 100% like total, if you do a bonus item, it's not going to count towards that percentage. It's purely a bonus to the final calculation. And then you could also exclude it from the final grade calculation if it's just kind of like a compulsory thing, you know, something you just want them to do, but it doesn't really count towards the grade. We have our grade scheme. You could also add rubrics to your grade items if you like, but you could also do that in the assignment or discussion itself. So either way works. And then I think at the top you could still do restrictions for grade items. So kind of like the categories, if you wanted them to see their grade after a certain date, like you're going to work on it for like 3 days after the due date or something like that, so you don't want them to see their grade until 3 days after, then you can have the start date of whatever 3 days after your due date is. But again, they're completely optional, and there are ways you can kind of put off releasing the grade that I will show you. But I'm just going to click Save and Close, and that'll create our grade item for us. It should be all the way at the bottom, because that's how Brightspace sort of adds things, is putting them at the bottom. And here we have our literary analysis number 2. So it's got no association yet, but we will change that. But I do kind of want to put it up next to my other literary analysis because I kind of like how that looks better than what it's doing now. So that brings me to how to reorder your items in the Manage Grades area. And this also reorders them in the Enter Grades area. So it directly affects whatever you're looking at in Enter Grades. So what you would do if you want to reorder your items here is to come up to More Actions and then Reorder. And this gives you sort of a test in like mental capacity, because sometimes, depending on the day, if I look at this, I'm like, I don't know what this means. But essentially what it is here in free write exercises, our category is number 1. If I had multiple categories, then they'd be named as such. And then within that category, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, which lines up with how I kind of numbered them, so that works out. Now I can see that this is 1, so all of its child items kind of go with it. But then literary analysis number 1 is number 2. I know that's a little weird to hear, but I know I want the second one to be number 3, and right now it's 12. So I'm just going to change this from 12 to 3, and it adjusts all the other ones accordingly. So now I can see that LA number 1 is place number 2, and then LA number 2 is place number 3. And then everything else kind of falls into place afterwards, which is fine with me. But you kind of just play around with it, and you'll get the hang of it after a minute or two. And you could always come in and reorder whenever you like. So if you save it and you realize it's not how you like it, you can always come back to More Actions and click Reorder and kind of see your items in the order you like. So now I have both of my literary analysis here, and I can go off and actually connect my grade item to my assignment. So this is one of those instances where I created the grade item and I created the assignment separately, and I kind of just want to make sure that whenever I grade that assignment, it goes into the grade book in the right place. So that's pretty much what we're doing. I'm going to click on assignments then, because I want to go to the assignment and connect it to the grade book. And if you remember from last week, we have these little symbols to indicate if something is in the grade book. So this little ribbon indicates that something is in the grade book. We have our free writes that all have little ribbons, so they're all in the gradebook, and I remember the associations were there. And now if I look at LA number 1, I do have a ribbon, and LA number 2 does not. So what I'm going to do here is just click on the context menu to give us some more options, and then click Edit Assignment. And here you can see right in the beginning it says not in grades. You may see something like in grades, but it's not like actually in grades. I don't know, it's a little confusing. But this area right here to the left of the due date and to the right of the score is where you want to click. So I'm going to click not in grades and then choose from, because I already have a grade item that I want to associate it with. If I came in here and I didn't have a grade item already, then I would just add it to grades to generate that grade item. But because I know I already have one, like I just created it, I'm going to click choose from grades, and it gives me the option of all available grade items, which, you know, we get a category, but I don't really want to do that. This is where it kind of trips people up. So I'm choosing from grades where I can then create and link to a new grade item, but that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is link to an existing one because I already made it, and then I have LA number 2. That's the one I want. So don't let it trip you up where it's going to have you create a new one if you already made one. Now, if you didn't already make one, this is a great option. Go forth, and it'll be fine. But if you link to an existing one, it gives you the option of all available grade items that do not have an association. And then you just select it from the drop down and click OK, and it kind of gives you the little ribbon over here. And just make sure you save it. Then it'll be in the gradebook, it'll have its nice little name, and whenever you grade those assignments, it'll go straight to that gradebook column. And just to show you that I did it right, I just want to make sure I did it right. I'm going to come back to grades, and if I scroll all the way over past my free writes, oopsie, past the free writes, we have LA number 2, and I can then come over to manage grades to make sure it has my association. So I can scroll down and we have an assignment. So we didn't have that before. We went back to assignments and edited it, picked the existing one, and here we are. So I kind of recommend creating them as you're creating the assignments, because then you don't have to remember to go back and do this. But either way works completely fine. And again, if you have questions when you're doing it, or it doesn't make sense and grades aren't going where they're supposed to, I can definitely help you out. Are there any questions about that at all? I hope it made sense. It's a lot of words. Alrighty, so I think what I'm going to do next is show you how to actually grade our 3 most popular activities. So that would be assignments, discussions, and quizzes. So for assignments, you just kind of come over to assignments, like the assignments tool. I think that's the best way to go about it. Even if you have it in the content tool for students, if you're going into grade, I always go in through the tool that it's associated with. So if I'm grading an assignment, I go to assignments. And then in the assignments page, we actually can go right to whatever thing we have in a submission for. And I think for my testing purposes today, it's free write number 4. But I will show you these little columns. We have a couple here, so you can see if you have new submissions just by looking in this column. So we have 1 in each of these. And you can usually just click on this new submissions link to see the new ones and grade them accordingly. This completed one is how many students completed it out of how many students you have. The evaluated is how many you have evaluated out of how many have been submitted. And then the corresponding publication of those grades. So usually if you have a bunch of students, which is much more than what I have, you would just click on the name of the assignment, or you could even click the context menu and click View Submissions. Both will get you to the same place. And if you click View Submissions, it shows you, you can email users without submissions. So if there's still some students who haven't submitted yet, you can always kind of poke them. You can also then scroll down to see the different students and their submissions. So we have the name of a student, and then their submission is right beneath it. We could see like the file type as well. We could see when they submitted it and how many days late, if it's late. And then you have the evaluate button. So you can either click on the student name or the evaluate button, and both should bring up the little grading activity evaluation page. So it opens up within the same page as your submissions, And what it does for files like PDFs or docs or PowerPoints even, is it opens it up as a PDF preview, and you can then annotate it with like your comments if you like. So I have a little thing here about Adobe. I guess that was my submission. And you can see up here, I have a couple different options that I can play around with. I can zoom in, I can zoom out. If I click on this little pen icon, that gives me my annotation tools. So I can then click on the marker to sort of like drop ink somewhere, draw a line if I want to underline something. I can also add like little sticky notes. So if you click on this little sticky note icon, you can then click the sticky note and pick the shape you like and just kind of place it somewhere. And then type out your note if you like. And it'll show up as whatever icon you chose, so then the student can then click on it to see what comment you left. You can also draw lines like this, or you can draw boxes for text. So you can kind of do whatever you like if you like using the annotation tools. Some people don't like using them, and that's okay. You still have an area for overall feedback over here on the right. And you can also record audio or video if you prefer to talk out your evaluation feedback. So we can say, great job, love the screenshots. And right above it, you can see we can give an overall grade. So I have this out of 25 points, allegedly. I know in the grade item it said 10 points, so it's going to math it out for me. But overall grade for this student would be, let's say, 25. They did a great job. So now, if you've put in a grade for the student, you have two options going forward. You can either save as draft in the bottom right, it's the gray button, which means it's not going to publish the grade to the student just yet, but it does save the fact that you gave them a grade. So if you are waiting to kind of release the grades for all students all at once, I recommend saving it as draft and then publishing afterwards. But if you're kind of just publishing them as you go, you just want to give it to, like, just have a student see it as soon as it's done being graded, you can just click publish, and then that student immediately gets the grade. Additionally, if you have extra students, which you definitely will, more than one, up here in the top right where it says user 1 of 1, you will usually see your actual total of students, and you could use the left and right arrow buttons to kind of go through each submission. So instead of going back to the submissions page and clicking a new student, you can just page through with these little arrow icons and kind of go through all of your evaluations. So I'm going to save as draft for this grading item because I don't want to publish it just yet. I want to show you what it looks like when you get to publish it all at once when you're done grading everybody. So I've saved as draft, and I'm going to click back to submissions. And once I'm here, you can see next to the student's name, instead of the evaluate button, we now have draft saved. So I know it's not published. I know the student cannot see it yet. So say I have like 10 students and I'm ready to publish all of their grades. I can then click on this checkbox at the top of the list. So right next to where it says last name, first name, it would highlight everyone for me. So all 10 of my students, if I had that many. And then you could just click publish feedback at the top. And it's going to say, everyone's going to get it. Are you ready for that? And you say yes. And now you can see next to the student's name, it's published and at what date and time. So you can tell that student's grade has been published, and if I go up to grades, I should see the grade in the gradebook. Hopefully it doesn't make me a liar. So that was free write number 4, and there it is. Woohoo! We did it. So I have free write number 4. The student got a 10 out of 10 because I gave them a 25 out of 25. Don't use my examples, they're not great. But we can see that the grade made it from the assignments tool to the gradebook, and that's really all that counts. It's all that matters to me. Are there any questions before we move on to discussions? Okay. I'm sorry, I cannot see your thumbs up today because it's on a different page, so I'm just assuming if we have silence, we're good. All right, so on to discussions. Same thing with assignments. I go to like the native tool, so I go to discussions to actually grade my discussions. And I should have one in here somewhere. I think, yes, under weekly discussions, week 1 discussion, I have a student who posted. So I can do 2 things here. With discussions, you can either grade a topic or grade a student. So if you have a student who posted multiple times in here like they're supposed to, you can grade it by student. So you could just kind of go through that way, or you can assess the topic in general. So I'm just going to show you how you would do that. First of all, you need to make sure that your discussion topic has assessment included. So it gives you that little ribbon just like we looked for in the assignments area. And if it says includes assessment, then we're good to go. You would click on this little arrow here, the little context menu, and scroll down in your options because assess topic is kind of towards the bottom, oddly enough. So we'll click assess topic. And we have some similar buttons to what we saw in assignment. We can publish all feedback, we can retract all feedback, but essentially with the discussions, you'll see a student's name and then topic score. So instead of the evaluate button like you saw with assignments, you'd click on topic score because it's blue. And if you click on that, I don't know if you're going to see it. I don't think you do because of how I shared it. But you'll get like a nice little, essentially the same thing as the assignments, where it comes up with a little grade area and it shows you their post. And if you have a rubric, it shows on top of the post so that you can kind of click through the different points. So I'm going to do that real quick because I know with my technical difficulties, you can't see it. But I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. Student did great. I'm going to save it as draft so I can then show you how to publish it again. So for here in the discussions area, we'll do the same thing with the checkbox. And then we can publish feedback because you can see our status is drafted here. So if I click publish feedback, I had a rubric in here, so it's giving me a problem, but it's fine. In the status, once we're done here, it'll then say published and when it was, so that we can see what the score is. We can see the publish is, it's published now and we're good. So it's pretty much the same thing as assignments. You just have a list of your students. You can click on their submission, whether it be a discussion post or an assignment, and then you get to see that assignment or discussion post, grade it accordingly, and you can either save it as draft or publish it. So they both look very similar. The only thing that's different is the quizzes. And they're only different in that you can either have them auto-graded if you're doing something like multiple choice or short answer that can be easily auto-graded, or if you're going in and grading them manually. So what I'm going to do here is come up to tools and then scroll down to quizzes. And in this area, we have our manage quizzes page, which we saw last week. And again, we're looking for that little grade item area here. So we have our little ribbons, which is great. I can also see that I have a grade published already. So what that means to me is that I auto-graded these quizzes. So I will show you what it looks like to actually grade them though. So if I click on the context menu of my quiz, I can click grade. So it's a little more straightforward than assess topic or view submissions. So if I click grade, I get to the grade quiz page. And here I will see, just like with the discussions, like a listing of attempts. So if I had this quiz set up for multiple attempts, I would see each of those attempts. But this is only a one attempt, so we can see that. We can see if it's submitted late, and what day and what time it was completed, and when it was, like when the grade was published. So if I click on this attempt number 1, it'll show me what that attempt was, what answers were given. I can see up at the top here when it was completed, the timing, like how long it took the student to do, and then the auto grade button is here because it already auto graded. So the student only got 1 point out of 7. So you can get some feedback in here if you like, but you can see their answers to the different questions as you go down. So we have the different color options here, picked the wrong one, but this is where you can come in to sort of override the question score. So for each of these questions, they have different point associations. And for this one, it's apparently 3 points. So I got a 0 on it, but maybe if I was feeling nice, pink could be one of my favorite colors, so I'll give them a 2 out of 3. So you can usually just come into the score and add it in or whatever you like. You can even give some feedback on individual questions if you so choose. But once you're done looking through here, you can either update the grade if you auto-graded it and you wanted to give them extra points, you can always update it. or you could retract it if you want to work on it some more and you don't want the student to see a false grade. But those are only really important if you auto grade the quizzes. If you don't have that set up, then you have to come in here and do it anyway. So at that point, you would see the save draft and publish buttons that we've seen before. But because this was technically graded and published to the student, that's why I have these two different buttons. So I'm just going to click update. It's going to give the student a couple more points. I can see down here that it's now a 3 out of 7, which isn't much better, but it's a 42 instead of a 17. So if I click on back, I can then see all the attempts. I could see the grade. It's now changed, and it was republished at 2:48 p.m. So I'm going to show you in the grades tool that little quirk I told you about the quizzes. So yes, the grade auto graded, it auto published to the student. They already saw it after the quiz was completed. But if they were to go to their grade book, and if they went to their quiz area, they wouldn't see anything in quiz 2. And that's because there's a specific setting you need to set up if you're going to put the quiz grade in the grade book. So I'm going to come over back to my quizzes tool and show you what I mean. You might recall from last week what I mentioned about it, but essentially there's just one checkbox we did not check. And to change it, you have to come to the context menu and click edit to edit the quiz. And then over here on the assessment tab, we have that allow attempt to be set as graded immediately upon completion, which is why that grade was graded and then published as soon as that student was done. But then there's this allow automatic export to grades, and that's what I didn't check, and that's why the grade is not in the grade book. So as soon as I check that, and as soon as I click save and close, I can come back to my grades tool and see that the grade is actually there. So hopefully it worked. Scroll all the way over to my Q2, there it is, and now we have a grade there. So even if we have it automatically graded after completion, you must have that automatic export also checked so that the grade can go here automatically. Even if you aren't automatically grading the quiz, you need that auto export to grades checked, unless you want to do it at a later time, like I just did. So that's just a quirk with quizzes. It doesn't matter for any other activity, it's just quizzes. But again, if you ever run into that problem and you need some help with it, just let me know, because I know what the problem is. But you guys have a lot more going on. I just know that issue specifically comes up a lot. So are there any questions before I kind of wrap up here? Or
Can I ask a question, Riley?
Sure. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Just, I just wanted, I don't know what context would be best to mention this in, but one really great thing that Moodle had that Brightspace doesn't, at least I can't see that it does, is if I had a student that had a problem with a quiz, if I wanted to change like a question, like occasionally a student will, when I'm going over their quiz, I will see a question that I think really shouldn't have been, like a mistake, like it wasn't that good of a question and I want to throw it out. I want to give everybody who got it right, I want to give them credit for it. Well, in Moodle, you could go to like a spreadsheet in Moodle where you could go to the question for everybody. So like, you know, if it was question 4, then I could just go to all the question 4s and go in and like give them all credit if they got it right. With Brightspace, they don't seem to have that. You have to go into each individual quiz from each student and go to that question and look for it. And so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. If there's any way that someday Brightspace might be receptive to suggestions or be able to take that, or if there is such a way to be able to look at one question across all the students for the same quiz. Right. I just wanted to bring that out.
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
Good.
I feel like I've come across that before, oddly enough. So let me take a minute here to see if I can find it. All right, so let's see if this works. So I know when you go to grade a quiz, you get to this users page automatically, which is what we've played around with. Okay. You could also go to attempts or to questions. So in the questions area, I think this is where we might find an answer. And it's been a while since I actually played around with this specific section. But I think what you could do is click maybe update all attempts and say this water bottle question is garbage. So I'll come in here and maybe give to all attempts the full 3 points or something.
Oh,
Or
okay.
to give to attempts with the following answer extra points. So if someone said, oh, well, it's pink, and that was also right for some reason, I could give them points specifically. I think you could do it that way. It's just hard for me to test because I only have one student.
Sure. How did you work? Could you just real quick just tell me that breadcrumb trail again real quick?
Sure, I can. Let's start from the beginning. So tools and then quizzes, because we're looking at quizzes. Oops.
Yep.
Quizzes, and then we go to the context menu of the quiz we're talking about and click grade. And then along the top under the gray buttons, like the line of buttons, you can click questions. And under questions, you could either grade individual responses or update all attempts. So if there's like a question for everybody that you want to give points for, I think you'd go to update all attempts. And then you just kind of click which question you want to edit for everybody.
Okay.
So hopefully that works. I might have to do some extra testing, like maybe add another test student and see how it does for everybody.
Yeah.
But that should be the area where it would happen if it's going to.
Because I'm gonna wonder if I could go into each of those questions and look at them, like in other words, see what each student chose. You know.
Oh, right.
But this is helpful. I mean, if I can at least across all a particular question update everybody's and give them credit for it, that's at least help. That's a big help.
Yeah, I think you can see how many students have responded which answer. Like if I click on one of my questions, like this favorite color one. So the correct answer on my side was this top one. That's what the arrow means.
Yeah.
But then this is how many students replied pink, and it was 100% of the class.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's a help. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The one more thing on the course management checklist is this class progress button that you may have seen in the gray or the green bar rather. So if you click on class progress, it just shows you a list of your students, and all of this content in these 4 columns can actually change based on what you want to see here. So for me, I have content completed, so how many items of my content have they actually looked at? We have assignment submissions, so how many assignments have they submitted to? Same with discussions, how many have they read, how many threads created, and then what their grade is sort of overall. You can change any of these by going to settings in the class progress area, and you can see which 4 you have selected, because you can only have 4 at a time. And say I wanted to change my assignment performance summary, I can click the context menu and then replace it. And this would show me like all of the other tools I could put here instead. So if I have more of a need to see the login history of the student, like when they've last logged into Brightspace, maybe that's what I want to replace it with. Or their quiz performance, their system access, you know, whatever you want from this list, you can replace any of these little tools with it. And it's just a useful sort of overview of your class and their interaction with your course content and your activities. But the other nice thing about this is that if you click on a student's name, it gives you like all of their interaction history with your course. So I clicked on a student's name and I get like their overall score right now. I can see how many grades they've received and what it's on and what they've gotten, when it was modified and published, that kind of thing. I can see objectives. I can see content, like what they've interacted with and for how long. So I can see here that they've gone through my first module pretty well. They spent 31 seconds on my first page, like things like that. You can get pretty deep down into it. But that is here in class progress. And if you do have multiple students, you'll see like an arrow key back and forward. So you can kind of arrow through the students to see their interaction with your course.